It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Puris coming to you from Baltimore. The OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is well known for promoting neoliberal policies, not much different than the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. This week, the OECD published a report titled "The Role and Design of Net Wealth Taxes in the OECD," which takes an unexpected turn, promoting the use of taxes on capital and even estate tax, a tax on your inheritance. Michael Roberts has been working in the City of London for over 30 years and is the author of several books, The Great Recession and The Long Depression. He joins us from London. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, Sharmini.
The report, The Role and Design of Net Wealth Taxes in the OECD. Give me in 1 minute what the report contains that is useful.
I think the first thing it says is that, first of all, wealth inequality is much more serious and much more important in many ways than income inequality, because wealth inequality generates more income inequality, and rich people have more power and influence and opportunities and able to generate income without work. One of the facts it points out in the report is that someone working for, say, 20,000 euros a year and gets all its money from capital is a much more powerful position than somebody having to work for $20,000 a year. And so working for $20,000 a year is a hard work. Getting income without doing anything at all is easy, and yet it also gives you much more power. So wealth accumulation reinforces the situation. Wealth begets wealth, says the report, and that gets more power. And that means we need to do something about it, because this situation will continue to get worse. The rich will get richer, and the poor, that's the rest of us, will get poorer, at least relatively. And that's what the report tells us. It's a really astounding report.
So, Michael, last time we spoke back in October, I think, about the IMF's murmurs about rising inequality in the world. And now we see that the OECD is joining this trend in terms of trying to address this inequality. Why is the OECD, which is a very neoliberal and anti-taxation kind of organization, adopting language that we have not heard them use before?
Yes, it's a very surprising development, Simon. As you say, the OECD has a reputation for being neoliberal, as some of us say on the left, which means that they're interested in preserving the interests of capital and not the interests of labor, and generally trying to raise profitability for most economies around the world, for the sections that own the means of production. And this is a bit of a surprising report. And they're saying that wealth inequality is much more important, much worse than income inequality, and something's got to be done about it, which is a very big surprise. And I think that's because they're concerned that the level of inequality in wealth globally and in most of the big economies is getting so extreme. We haven't seen these levels probably for 150 years, that it could lead to a breakup of the social fabric and political protest. And they recognize that something's got to be done about it.
All right. Now, we've known about this growing inequality for a very long time. And I suppose the 2013 book by Thomas Piketty may have brought it further into light, the French economist who wrote the book Capital in the 21st Century. Now, since then, they've had an opportunity to address this issue, but not much has happened interim, and now they're bringing it about. So it raises a question of, how serious are they? Are they willing to change the laws of the OECD countries? And are they willing to really go out and bat for these policies when it comes to national governments adopting such policies?
I think there's little chance of it. I mean, just to give you a few extra facts, which are not in the OECD report, that the UN economists came up with, they found that the top 1% of wealth holders in the world own 51% of all the wealth in the world, and the top 10% own 85% of all the personal wealth in the world. And that richest 1%, well, at the rate that they're increasing their wealth at 6% a year, will have 2/3 of the world's wealth by 2030. That's a staggering figure. The level of wealth for the top 1% is growing at twice the rate of the level of wealth for the rest of us in the world's population. And of course, the vast majority of the world's population doesn't have any wealth at all. So it would mean that the top 1% would have, can you think of this, $305 trillion worth of wealth in forms of financial assets, property, and cash savings. More than double now. That's a massive increase. And that's why the OECD is being forced to think about it. But I have no doubt that none of the governments that we look around the world, the major governments, are going to do anything about this. We know that the US administration under Donald Trump, far from looking at reducing the wealth of the rich, is adding to the wealth of the rich by cutting corporate tax and income tax for the rich. In other countries, the mainly centre-right governments in Germany, in Sweden, in Britain, in Japan, none of these governments have any programme at all for reducing the level of wealth inequality, let alone income inequality, or any programme to do so, or any intention to do so over the next few years.
Robert, what do they call the inheritance tax or the state tax, or what the Republicans in the US call the death tax? They're not very popular because, of course, this means that you can't, transfer all of your wealth onto the next generation, your children, and maintain the elite ruling class we have in the US and, of course, beyond all over the world. How could we attack this? How could the OECD, if you had the opportunity to advise them, how can it be done?
Well, there are several things, I think, Charmaine. First of all, is it the best way to tax people who are receiving benefits from when their parents or relatives die? Is that the most important issue, the personal wealth tax, which is the view of Thomas Piketty and others, the economists you talked about? Or is it more important to have real control over the concentration of capital which exists in the big corporations, the big companies which control our means of production and lead to the generation of this huge income growth and wealth growth for the top 1%? Seems to me we should be looking in that area. The OECD admits that taxing incomes would not actually do much to change the level of wealth inequality. And they're looking at the taxation, maybe, of inherited wealth. And going further, perhaps, only 4 countries in the world actually tax wealth. Everybody taxes, governments tax income, but they don't tax wealth. Very few countries. And the number of countries prepared to do that is actually falling, not rising. So it seems to me that looking at personal wealth is only one area. The way we really need to look at is what's going on with corporate wealth and the concentration of capital there. And one other area, Charmaine, is the huge amount of havens where no wealth is taxed at all. Where Daniel Zuckman, who is a colleague of Thomas Piketty, did a special study a few years ago, and he found that 8% of all the wealth in the world is just being hidden away in tax havens like Panama. We know about the Panama Papers that's revealed this. A huge amount of wealth that's just not taxed at all, hidden away, and perfectly legally in many cases by the various laws. It seems to me that first we must stop the tax havens, which are taking place internationally. Secondly, we must look at the concentration of capital in the big corporations. A Swiss institute did a survey which found 147 companies, just 147, control 70% of all the corporate wealth in the world. And if we had some sort of control over how they generate that wealth and how they distribute it by controlling them, then we'd be in a much better position to reorganize the inequality of wealth. Just looking at trying to reduce the amount of income that the top 1% have, I don't think is going to be sufficient. And the OECD agrees with that.
All right. Robert, then if the IMF and the World Bank and the OECD and the even the European Central Bank, ECB, they're very effective at demanding and forcing nation states into implementing austerity measures, for example. So in effect, if these institutions took the position that there must be better distribution of wealth in a country, those policies need to be put in place. Inequality must be reduced, the gap must be closed, and so on. If they were to have policies of that nature, they're quite capable of implementing them, aren't they?
They are perfectly capable of implementing them. It's a question of political will and political action. As I said earlier, Jermaine, most of the governments which are in power at the moment, administrations in the major economies where this will be necessary, are governments that have no such program. And in fact, the opposite. They are supporting the policies and interests of capital rather than the interests of the 99%. So here we have the OECD, a respected international economic agency, which is supposedly providing advice and research about what should happen. And it's telling the governments of the major governments of the world that inequality of wealth is way too high, much even worse than inequality of income, which is bad enough, and getting worse, and something must be done about it, whether it's taxing on wealth or whatever. And we have a bunch of governments, the major governments who represent, say, in the G20, all of whom, virtually all of whom, have no intention of doing anything about this. It reminds me, Charmaine, of the arguments about climate change. The science shows that the world is heating up, global warming is getting out of hand, it's going to damage the world's natural resources and ruin people's lives, but governments are not prepared to do anything serious about it. So it's down to political will and political action. And your viewers and readers should, and listeners should be aware that it's really a question of political action, not some sort of impossible task that can't be turned around.
I've been speaking with Michael Roberts, the author of The Great Recession and the Long Depression. Michael, I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.